Welcome to the explosive offer from Remote Support LLC. Remote Support LLC is offering a limited amount of preference shares. This is a great opportunity to invest in the company. The biggest advantage of these preference shares is the very high percentage dividends. Preference shares also have priority over common shares in terms of dividend payments. The shares are very limited in quantity and they are at the pre-seed level. The company does not do anything fancy. It basically provides IT support services, and almost every company and individual these days uses IT services. As far as risk mitigation goes, these are shares in a real registered company which is incorporated in May 2024. In 2 months, this company is going to be 1 year old, and this is not like a coin offering or a digital currency or a coin or something like that. This is not crypto. It's shares inside a company. The name of the company is Remote Support LLC. You can look it up. We encourage you to do so. The type of offering is preference shares. The dividend rate is extremely high. The quantity is very limited. For more details about the offering, you can contact us. The company provides IT solutions 24/7 globally. The founder has got more than 30 years of experience doing this business. And another company of the founder in the similar field but in a different geographical area has been operating profitably since 1992. The method to invest is to contact us, go through the terms, get the preference shares. If the preference shares run out and you still want to invest in the company, then we have non-voting ordinary shares, and these are available up to 10% of the company. The contact number is 1-563-231-7041. You can email at info@remote-support.space, and our website is remote-support.space. Thank you for taking the time to see this presentation. I hope you will contact us and evaluate this great investment opportunity. Welcome to the presentation on types of shares. My name is Khavar Nihal, and I represent Applied Technology Research Center. In this presentation, I shall be explaining some of the types of shares available. If there are any types that are not mentioned in this and you think they should be, please contact and I'll update the presentation. Common shares. These are also known as ordinary shares. They're the most common type. They usually have voting rights, and they have dividends also, and they carry a little bit of risk. Preferred shares, also known as preference shares, they have the advantage that their payment and their dividend comes first before the payment or dividends into the common shares. And they also have liquidation preference. That means if the company is going to be closed, they get paid first. After they get paid their value, and then the other common shares will be paid off. The disadvantage of preferred shares is usually they have zero voting rights or very, very few voting rights. In the preferred shares, there is usually a percentage per year. For example, if you say there is 10%, then they are entitled to get 10% every year as a dividend. And there are two types of accumulation in the dividend. For example, it's cumulative or non-cumulative. That means if it is cumulative, so if the company does not make money in the first year, for example, and they were supposed to get 10%, they don't get their 10%, but maybe the company makes plenty of money at year 4, and for the first 3 years they were supposed to get 10% every year, so they will get 30% for the first 3 years if there is enough profit available to give those dividends. And then the rest of the dividends or profits will be given to the common shareholders after the preference shares cumulative dividends have been provided. Similarly, in non-cumulative preferred shares, If the company does not make enough money to meet the percentage requirements, then they might get a lower percentage, or they'll get a dividend, or maybe they might not get a dividend at all. So the company is not obligated to pay the old dividends. For example, if they make money at the year 4 and it has not paid for the first 3 years, it will not be paying for the first 3 years. It'll just be paying for the 4th year, and they'll give 10% for the 4th year if the rate is set at 10%. Redeemable shares are those shares that can be bought back by the company. This is called a repurchase or buyback, and the company can set a price and a date at which they have the option to buy these shares back. Okay, the price and date is usually set after a few years, so that the investors actually get their dividends for a few years before the company can actually buy back. This is usually common, but it's not necessary that there is a price and a date. The company could make an offer in the future depending on the terms set in the redeemable shares. Non-redeemable shares are those similarly that cannot be bought back by the company, and they will stay with the investors as capital. Convertible shares are those that can be converted from one type to another. So for example, if the company gives preference shares and in the future they want to convert them into ordinary shares, that would already be mentioned in the terms. So the company could decide to convert from one to another depending on what the situation is in the future. Non-convertible shares are those where you cannot convert from one to another. Different combinations of facilities or types of shares are divided into classes. For example, they might have preference shares, and the company might call their preference shares Class A shares, and then they might have ordinary shares with a set of voting rights, and they would call them Class B shares. Then they might have other ordinary shares with higher or lower voting rights or the other attributes, and they would be classified as Class C, D, E. And so the classes are actually defined, they're not really fixed, but generally they're set in by the companies. These classes are defined in the Articles of Association of the company. Every company can have a different set of shares, and they can call every set whatever class they would like. There is no fixed set. Some companies might implement an employee stock ownership plan. These are special shares allocated for employees as a part of their compensation. The advantage of this method is, for example, startups might offer instead of giving complete cash or no cash, and give shares instead. The use of these type of shares are usually for companies that might be a startup, and they don't really have much cash available for employees, and their employees are willing to take partial or complete payments in shares instead of just cash. Bonus shares are those that are provided for free to the investors. For example, they might have a 10% bonus, so that means if you have got 10 ordinary shares already, you might get one free share as a dividend. So the advantage of these shares is that they are not a dividend, so they cannot be taxed as income tax. And in most countries, the dividend is considered as an income, and it is taxed as an income tax. And bonus shares are just shares which have been provided to the person. And in most countries, the capital gains tax is less than the income tax. So when you sell your shares at that time, the difference in price, for example, if you bought a share at 100 and you sell it at 120, your capital gains would be 20 and you would pay the capital gains tax on the 20, not an income tax. Usually in most countries, the income tax is higher than the capital gains tax. So the advantage of these type of bonus shares is, for example, you had 10 shares, you bought them at 100, the price may be 120, so the capital gains for you would be 20 times 10, which is 200. But if you get bonus shares, for example, the company gives 10% bonus shares instead of a dividend, then you will have 11 shares available, and they would each be priced at 120. So if you do sell them, you only pay for the difference in price as the capital gains tax. Right shares are those that are provided also similar to bonus shares. They're like a dividend, but instead of paying cash or giving the shares for free, the company provides a discount on the shares. So if the price is running at, for example, 100, the company might say, okay, we won't give it to you for free, or we won't give you like 1/10 of a share for every share that you have. We'll give you the shares at 90% the price, the prevailing price. So for example, if the current price is 100, the company might say, okay, we'll offer you another share at 90. But this is only for the shareholders. And then there is also a ratio as to how many right shares they're providing for every share that you have. Usually it's 1-to-1. So for example, if you have got one share already of the company and they offer a 1-to-1 ratio, that means one right share will be provided to every shareholder. So if you have got 10 shares, you can buy 10 shares also at 90% of the price, depending on what the offer is. Sweat equity shares are similar to ESOPs, and they are basically compensation for work done by the employees and directors for the services that they provided. Treasury shares. These are shares that have been bought back by the company, and they can be held, reissued, or cancelled depending on the situation and what the company thinks is best for that situation. Differential voting rights. Differential voting right shares. These shares have reduced or zero voting rights, and they might have higher dividends to compensate for the lack of or reduction of voting rights. Thank you for taking the time to see this presentation. I hope it benefits you in some ways. I would love to get some feedback on any of the shares which you think are not listed in here, so I can upgrade the presentation. And I would encourage you to have a look at the offering that we are providing for preference shares currently, and see if you can evaluate that and see if it's useful for you as an investment.